The long-awaited Final Fantasy XVI is finally here. I cleared everything available to me in my first playthrough, and at the time of this video I'm working on a new playthrough since it offers a new difficulty. I have quite a few things to say about Yoshi P's new baby, so I'll start going over that pretty soon. When it comes to doing these reviews, I focus on 5 aspects I feel are crucial to any game, the top 3 elements being the game's story, gameplay, and music, and the secondary elements being graphics and replayability. My review will be divided into 2 parts. Part A is an objective as possible review of what the game has to offer, and Part B, my own thoughts and feelings with the experiences I had with the game. Of course, as with any review, my own biases may seep through, but I'll do my best to curb any of that for this first section. Without any further ado, let's begin. I won't say anything that will be major spoilers, but what I will discuss happens in the early hours of the game. Final Fantasy XVI follows Clive's journey of discovering the truth of what happened in his past. When he was a teenager, he was a prince whose job was to protect his younger brother Joshua. Joshua was heir to the throne because he was chosen by the icon Phoenix, usurping Clive's seniority because he wasn't. Instead, Joshua gave Clive the blessing of the Phoenix in order to help protect him, yet despite the imbalance in their social prestige, the two brothers loved one another very much. One thing leads to another and, out of control, Joshua turns into the Phoenix, prompting a mysterious, fiery figure to appear before Clive. Clive blacks out and the icon Ifrit appears. The two icons engage in a long heated battle, and at the end of it, Ifrit stands victorious. Clive seems to have an out-of-body experience and sees Ifrit killing Phoenix, and by proxy, his brother. Clive awakens in the rubble of the destroyed area that the icons were fighting in, and is taken by the army to be enslaved. About a decade later, Clive meets a man named Sid, and from there they work to discover who killed Joshua, fight slavery, and learn why something called the Blight has been ravaging the land. As a whole, the story of 16 is pretty good, and is mostly only afflicted by its pacing. The tale of Clive and his merry band of outlaws is an intriguing story of mystery. Often you'll find yourself questioning where everything is leading, but almost everything seems to build up to a satisfying story. In regards to the pacing, story structure is handled like this basically. You do a big mission, it's very engaging, both gameplay and story. You watch the big cutscene at the end, and then you move on to the next story mission, but this time with downtime. It's a whole lot of walking and talking, which is necessary for the story to breathe. You can't have something insane happening every mission. The unfortunate thing is that the downtime is it's 2 down. You will find yourself quite bored during these missions, even more so if you're doing the side quests as well. On the topic of side quests, these offer very little to either the overall story or world. There are some that do help flesh out the characters or reinforce the themes of the narrative, but most of them are quite boring and, with a dash of irony, very MMO-like. What makes it worse is that there are some very good ones littered throughout, so unless you know the ones that are actually worth doing, you'll be dealing with quite a bit of fluff that brings no satisfaction in any real capacity. The last thing I'll note on the story is that it does leave some dangling threads with questions that don't, and most likely won't, be answered. Some things that are very intentional and others that don't quite feel that way, and seem like they may have been set up and forgotten about. The gameplay breaks away from Final Fantasy's tradition of turn-based combat and goes in a character action route. With developers from Platinum Games, Kingdom Hearts, and DMC on board, the game plays absolutely like nothing else in the series except maybe for Strangers of Paradise. There is no conventional party system, it's just Clive and his pet wolf Torgal beating ass. You occasionally have a guest in your party, but they don't really contribute much outside of periodically helping kill weaker enemies. Clive has access to a range of powers, called icons, from the gifts he received from his brother when he was younger, to his wolf, to other icons that will unlock for him. You can only carry 3 icons at a time, so you get to pick what kind of unique ability you like, and if you master some of their abilities, you can mix and match what you like in different slots. The core experience is dodging or parrying when you're about to be attacked and punished accordingly, with the goal of beating down their stagger bar so you can even do more damage. On smaller enemies, you're able to air combo them and stagger them and generally bully them, but on larger enemies, you'll have to keep defense on the mind since they don't care much for your attacks. The gameplay loop is enjoyable, but the only downside is the game is too easy. This makes having access to all these fun things a bit disappointing because most of the enemies you fight will be pushovers. The devs had accessibility in their minds when creating the game's experience, and 16 offers a story mode for players who have no interest engaging in the gameplay and even has timely accessories to make the gameplay easier, such as auto evade. I think this design philosophy spilled over into other portions of the game though, in a negative way. Enemies are generally pretty slow and their attacks generally have long startups. For bosses, there are always QTEs that are basically negligible and brings up the question of why even include them. You will probably only die a small handful of times throughout your playthrough because the game is actually just that easy, even on the game's dedicated action mode. And therein lies the issue, because once you're used to the controls and whatever icons you're using, you start to get bored, because there really isn't much of a challenge, even on its New Game Plus unique Final Fantasy difficulty. They can't implement this difficulty though on a base playthrough because there's more going on with it than just stat inflation. For the base experience, there should have been a combat veteran difficulty or something akin to that, but would have had just a bit more going on with it, you know? Gearing is basically inconsequential because everything is just slight stat ups outside of accessories, and the accessories are pretty basic too. You either get a damage increase or a cooldown reduction, and there's only one accessory in the entire game that actually changes how the game plays. So it's a little disappointing that there wasn't more of this mentality in gear design. At the end of the day though, gearing is just really basic. There's some fun optional content available too, such as time trials and hunts. Time trials are just that, waves of enemies that you need to beat in a certain amount of time. Hunts are powerful enemies that unlock as you go through 16, and in some cases, offers a nice bit of challenge. Coming from Final Fantasy XIV, Masayoshi Soken is the main composer of Final Fantasy XVI, bringing with him his extraordinary talent for creating music. The soundtrack is mostly orchestrated with a few pleasant surprises sprinkled throughout. The music always fits the location and story moment. It has a leitmotif that you will frequently recognize as you play. In the game's secret base is a jukebox, and there you can listen to a solid selection of tracks whenever. There's a similar system in 14, and considering how strong Soken's arrangements are, it comes as no surprise that they would decide to inherit this. Soken and the rest of the team did a truly fantastic job on this soundtrack. Living up to Square's legacy of phenomenal graphics, 16 delivers. Almost everything you see in 16 is in-engine. Occasionally there's pre-rendered scene, but the margin and difference between the scene and in-engine is very slim. Now this is subjective, but I would say some of the in-engine graphics even rival the CGI from the PS2 era. With the game looking this good though, there does come some drawbacks. Presentation-wise, the game really delivers. Like other PS5 titles, 16 gives you the choice of choosing a graphics or performance mode. Graphics mode ups the quality a bit with the sacrifice of FPS, and performance mode is supposed to increase the FPS while sacrificing graphics. Regardless of the mode you pick though, you will barely reach 60 FPS most of the time. Graphics mode runs at a mostly consistent 30 FPS. Performance bounces around 40 unless you're in combat, where it does sit at a consistent 60. But as soon as you leave combat, it will drop. Both modes have their benefits, but they also have their drawbacks, so it becomes a pick your poison type of thing. The game's replayability is pretty middling. After you beat the game for your first time, you unlock a new difficulty called Final Fantasy Mode. This difficulty option is your incentive to replay the game. Enemies are stronger, there's some slight modifications to the type of enemies you encounter. You inherit all of your icons and gear and begin your New Game Plus, and this kind of balances it out. But gameplay wise, it feels almost exactly the same, with occasional alterations to the formula, which is a letdown because the difficulty you might have been looking for in this new mode is not going to be there. There's only one New Game Plus exclusive weapon, and there are no super bosses of any kind, so this mode is mostly just there as some extra fluff. Beyond gameplay though, we're playing for the magnificent set pieces and story, totally worth it. Aside from the pacing issues that the story suffers from, and the middling difficulty or lack of replayability, the game is still exceptionally written, the combat is still fun and engaging, and you will be immersed in the world. Overall, Final Fantasy XVI is a phenomenal game that I would absolutely recommend if you have a PS5 and like Final Fantasy. Even if you don't like Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy XVI gets 4 found flames out of 5. Before I start going over my personal thoughts, I just have one question for Yoshi P. Why? Why? Why is there no sprint button? There are open slots, there are open button mappings. Why is there no sprint button, Yoshi P? I know. I've played Final Fantasy XIV back in the day, so I know that people bitched at you about sprint and TP, so you know people want to run around. Why? Why did you not give us a sprint button? Clive is so slow. everyone playing the game will agree on this. Please, Yoshibe, in the future, give characters a sprint button. For this section, it'll mostly be a talk box of me just going over what I liked or disliked about Final Fantasy 16. And there's a bit of both. It's not a perfect game. We'll follow the same kind of structure that the first part of the review did. The story, I really like. I really like the story. All the characters are great. Gav in particular, I think, is probably my favorite character. But even beyond him, like, everyone who comes into Clive's life, you know, in a significant kind of way, is pretty good. They all have their own quirks and personalities, and they all feel very human. So I thought that the character writing was very good. It was definitely very good. The story, like I said, was very good. It's definitely very interesting playing throughout the story and wondering, like, you know, what's gonna happen next. You know, constantly, like, because like almost every time something big happens, they introduce something else kind of on the side, like, what's that doing there, you know, like what's going on there. And typically speaking, they will, like, come back and reconnect that, or, you know, it's almost like a layered kind of storytelling, and I think it really works. It does really work. There are some parts that are a bit disappointing, and that, like, for example, like, they'll write it in a way that kind of forces, like, this suspense, but, like, in the moment you might be like, oh shit, but then, like, you'll think about it and you'll be like, wait, why did that just happen, right? Here's two examples. One, and of course there's gonna be some spoilers here, not like in game, but there are gonna be spoilers in what I'm about to say, so it's like, here's a few seconds if you need to. All right, and I'm about to say it. So early on, you re-encounter your dead brother Joshua. He's, you know, surprise, he's not dead. He comes back and he saves Clive from basically being killed, essentially. And in that cutscene, Clive and Jill are indisposed underground during a cave-in, while Joshua is fighting this big baddie and holding him off. And Joshua does win, but Joshua is also down for the count afterwards. So everyone in that cave, effectively, is unable to do anything, while the cave literally crumbles around them. And it cuts to black. And we flash forward like 5 years, and Clive and Jill are just fine. So it's like, now, there's like a certain suspension of, you know, disbelief, but like, or no, is this a suspension of belief? Either way, there's, like, you know, because they don't address it. They don't say, oh yeah, actually Gav, he followed you guys, he got you out. There's no kind of explanation for how they got out of the cave-in, because by all means they were fucked. But it just worked out, I guess. So there's like that. And then another example, and this one I do kind of take particular offense to, because it just seems like bad writing. Like, there's one thing with the cut to black, no explanation, and then there's this. So a little later in the game, Clive and his uncle are following Titan, and they get into a bar fight. And, like, as the post time skip kind of thing is happening, they're kind of following in Joshua's footsteps. Like, Joshua is ahead of them, but they don't meet, but they end up in the same bar. And during this time, Joshua's upstairs, and his attendant, Yote, is looking after him. Because after the fight with the big bad, he's kind of sick. So during the bar fight, Yote goes to see what's going on. And she sees Clive. She knows who Clive is. She certainly knows who Uncle Byron is. Both of them are Rossfields, and she basically, her role as an assistant, she comes from a group who basically worship the Rossfields and the Phoenix. So there's no way she doesn't know the people she's looking at, right? And for whatever reason, she decides to run. She runs back into the room. She takes Joshua, and they literally jump out of the window. They leave their food behind, and they run. And this is never explained. It is never like why. It's never even implied that Joshua is trying to avoid Clive, because the entire time Joshua he's been doing his own thing, trying to figure out what happened back in the day when Ifrit basically killed him. So there's no real and that's the only reason he hasn't linked up with Clive, is because he's been trying to solve that mystery. So like it's very jarring, and it's very weird, and it's this very fake suspense of Yote like, oh, we gotta go, we gotta run, because it literally it's built on nothing, and it goes nowhere, because shortly after this we do meet up with Joshua just fine. So it doesn't make any sense. Those are my two major gripes with the story. Or no, that's my only major gripe with the story. The other one is whatever. But beyond that, the game does suffer pretty badly in terms of pacing. I'm not sure if that's because like during these big scenes they are just so fucking blockbuster, right? Like blockbuster action movie, like just like dopamine, right? I'm not sure if that's why, because after you finish those sections and you start doing the downtime stuff, it is just like at first it's kind of okay, but like as it starts going on and you start recognizing the formula, it just kind of starts to wear you down, and like it becomes very tiring and boring doing these in between moments, which is I don't know. I'm not like a writer, so I couldn't say what they should have done instead. And like I said, maybe it could just because like, we're dealing with peaks, and now we're back to the middle. I don't know. So it is, and you'll feel it a lot. This is not like a unique to me kind of feeling. This is something I've heard from almost everyone that I've seen play the game. Almost everyone. They do the big fight, then the downtime, and they are bored. But that downtime, it is necessary. Like you can't just have boom, 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 boom. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't do that. And I don't know. But it does hurt the game. It does. And then you have side quests. And these are especially disappointing, because I did watch an interview with Koji Fox and Yoshi P, and they specifically brought up side quests and how they wanted to do them different and make them better, but they didn't. These side quests suck. They are boring. You're just doing them to do them. And like sometimes there's like nuggets of information, but like nothing in really an ever relevant kind of way. Early game, anyway, or like 90% of the game, like the last 10% of the game, like all those side quests are very good, and one of them is basically vital, like to understanding the ending, because the ending will probably confuse most people if they haven't done this side quest and paid attention to it. So there's that. But there are like actual good ones. Like come the end game, like all your party members have their own unique side quests that you do, and like these feel very engaging. And they flesh out the characters more and their relationships with Clive, and they're very nice. They are very nice. But for the rest of them, they're not so nice. They're just whatever, you know. 9 times out of 10, they're just like, hey, can you go kill this one enemy who most of the time is just an enemy. It's not even there's nothing even special about the enemy. It's just like, hey, go kill this, I don't know. Go kill this wolf, right? Like it's like that, or go and grab me. I don't know. Were there like fetch quests? Because there's like items are kind of like weird in this game. So like I feel like there were maybe not like items, but there are definitely moments where like, hey, can you go talk to like these 3 or 4 people and then come report back to me? So there's definitely those. But these side quests are also quite slow. So these unlock during the downtime segments. So you're doing this slow stuff on top of that slow stuff, and it's rough. It is rough. So sometimes when you play, especially if you're doing like everything, you'll have most definitely like, okay, here's the big day, right? Here's the big fight. We're doing this, and then you might do the downtime for a little bit and then call it. And then the next time you play, you'll just be doing side quests for 2 to 3 hours. Like, okay, neat. Next. And then, yeah. So, very, very, very disappointing there. I think that's about all I want to say on the story. Like, I can't think of anything else to make note of. Torgal best boy, Gav best boy. Yeah. Overall, though, even with like some of these gripes, I still very much enjoy the story, and I will probably play just for the story again one day. For gameplay, the game is very fun. It is definitely very fun. It's just too easy, and that is a shame. It almost reminds me of One Piece Odyssey, if anyone's ever played that. One Piece Odyssey had a very fun idea for turn-based combat, and it was ridiculously easy, like even easier than 16. So it's like the concept is still the same for both games, though. So they both got interesting gameplay, fun gameplay, and it's just the gameplay is completely brought down and made almost boring because of how easy the game is. They give you these tools, and it's like, what, you're giving me all this stuff, but all I need is a screwdriver, right? So, it's very disappointing in that regard. And even so at this point, I've played up to like the first major boss of the story on Final Fantasy mode, and it's basically exactly the same. There's been some different enemies along the way, but it's basically exactly the same. So in terms of difficulty, it's like, okay, this is basically what I expect for the rest of the game as I go through Final Fantasy mode. Now, I am doing it a little different in that I'm like doing like a no-hit kind of thing, because you do get it's like a little token reward. Like, it doesn't do anything, but it's like a, hey, you did it, like a gold sticker. You beat this boss without being hit. So like I'm doing that for all the bosses, just to also add a layer of difficulty. And I will say that does make it a lot more engaging than if you don't. It just sucks though that there's like no retry button, so you have to be sure you have a save right before the point, and then whenever you get hit, you have to load the game. It's like, okay, that sucks, but it is what it is. Other than that, the hunts are pretty fun. Mostly because like they take, you know, mobs you might have fought in the past, like we'll say like a chocobo, and they'll actually give them some mechanics. So it's not just like the same move set. So it makes the fight a bit more engaging. So hunts are definitely like cool. Especially like they're ranked on their difficulty. So like the S ranks hunts are the best hunts in the game. And some of them are better than some of the actual in-game bosses. So there's that. It's just, I feel like there should have been more S rank hunts, because there's no post game. There's no post game. The post game is new game plus Final Fantasy mode. That's the post game, and that is a shame. There's no super bosses. There's no like optional dungeon or anything. There's none of that. And that is definitely, for me, a downside. Because I want to say in most, modern Final Fantasies, there's always been this. There's always been like this extra, like, so you like the game, right? And you want to keep playing the game, right? Well, here you go. This is your own thing, or this is something for you to do that is going to challenge you. It's going to keep you coming back. And 16 does not have that. 16 does not have that at all. Like, the closest thing you're going to get is, obviously New Game Plus Final Fantasy mode. But the closest thing you will get is there are these, they're called Artet stones, okay? And they're basically like an arcade mode. You can go in there to like practice combos, this and that, but you can also use them to replay old stages. And on Final Fantasy mode, when you beat a stage, it unlocks in the Artet stone on an even higher difficulty called Ultimaniac, and that is the closest thing that you will get to a post game, because that is supposed to take the difficulty up even higher. I haven't done these yet, so I can't say for certain how good they even are. Like, do you die in one hit? Are enemies just like super spongy? I couldn't say for certain. I haven't tried it out. I will eventually try it out just to get a taste, but it's definitely a shame. It's definitely a shame that there's no post game, and that might change, because I know I'm almost like 90% sure. Like, even though Yoshi P said this is a full game experience, this is the whole thing. We want it to be happily playable in one package without needing DLC. Like, I definitely feel like, though, it's set up for making people want DLC. Because I want DLC. I want to keep playing the game, but there's no there's no difficulty. There's nothing to push me. So I don't know what they plan on doing there. They might just do story stuff, following maybe like some of your party members. Like, Sid is a pretty integral part to the story, so there might be like a flashback of him, of what he was up to before he created the Outlaws, a place for bears and stuff to hide out at, because he used to work for the big bad, like not the big bad, but like the big bad's like henchman. So at some point he realized, yeah, like this is no good. I'm getting out of here. So they might do that, or they might do like a Leviathan DLC, because the main TLDR, the main goal of the story, beat a bunch of crystals. The crystals represent icons, yada, yada, yada. But there was one crystal that was lost, and that crystal was Leviathan's crystal. And they don't really touch on this at all. Like, they literally drop like the smallest little nuggets of information that so like you're aware that it's there, that it exists, that it doesn't exist, that it existed, and you're just kind of left with a question mark. So they might do a DLC on that. Personally, what I would hope for is like a Kingdom Hearts style DLC. So like maybe they could do something like that, but also more importantly, bring like a new level of difficulty, with some ramped up boss fights. I think that would probably be like the best path to walk down, like if they do DLC. Because if they just give us more fights on an already easy game, then it's like, okay, cool, I'm now doing the Leviathan set piece. It's neat. Whatever. So at some point, these giant fights, their spectacles will wear off. They will. I think that's about all I have to say. Those are my major takeaways from the game. Overall, yeah, I really liked it. Like, personally, I'd give it like a 4 out of 5 maybe. It's still not my favorite Final Fantasy. 4 out of 5, like 8 out of 10, like it's not a 9, you know. So I would say that actually lines up a lot with what I've been seeing like on Metacritic and stuff, actually. So yeah, like I'm gonna keep playing Final Fantasy mode because I do enjoy the game. I do. At the very least, I'm gonna get my money's worth. I mean, I bought a PS5 just for this. And I will say though, like that, I will say, like I do not regret that decision. Like I do very much enjoy. Like, that's how much I enjoyed 16. That I don't mind that I shelled out $500, $600 for a PS5 to play it, basically. So yeah, I would totally recommend it, especially if you like games like DMC, especially. But that's about it. Yeah. Cool game. Good game. Thank you, Yoshi P. Thank you, Goji. Thank you, everybody else that was on board. And with that, peace.